Welcome to the I Am Power podcast, where we hear inspirational stories and then we turn that into art that reminds us to be great. Each week, we dive deep into the story of a special person who discovered their power against all odds. All of the inspiration from each story is then memorialized into a painting that can be purchased in limited print quantities. This podcast is for anyone who is seeking to get out of their own way and step into their life's potential and well-deserved happiness. Let's listen in.
Don't be afraid to show up as your true self and be confident and say the things you want to say and be authentic about your feelings and your expression, because that's all really that matters. You only have one life.
Thank you so much, Tijana, for being here today. I'm so excited to have you. I just want to tell my listeners a little bit about how I found you. I actually found you on TikTok through one of the stories that you shared, and I thought that's an interesting story, and I can kind of resonate with that a little bit because I had a previous relationship with somebody who was narcissistic, and I didn't even know that that was a thing until I got out of it. So I connected with you on that level. But yeah, I want to get to your backstory here in just a minute, but I would like for you to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. And I love everything you're doing with this, by the way. So
yay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So man, my backstory with the narcissism, I know what you mean. Looking back, you don't really know what you're going through until you reflect on it later. So I had a pretty tough childhood with my mom. My mom is the narcissist in my life, and we had a difficult relationship. I never knew what to make of it. I carried around feeling bad about it for pretty much my whole life. And then I was always told, like, well, your parents provided food and shelter for you, so be grateful. Like, even therapists told us this. We went to therapy, all this stuff. I'm just giving you the short Coles Notes version.
Yeah.
But then, even the therapists were not trauma informed, or I never heard the term narcissist or anything like that. And then one time, I don't know if other people do this, but this was recent. Last year, I got frustrated with my family, so I actually Googled things they were doing that I was like, what if your family does this? And then
is this normal?
Yes. And then I was like, whatever I Googled, it came up like list of toxic family symptoms. And that's the first time I really heard toxic family. And then it was really the first time I looked at it from the lens of like, oh, I always thought I was like the troubled child, or I was causing the behavior, or I was the problem. Like, they told me this, the therapist told me this. So then reading this list, I kind of checked off every box and thought, wait a minute, like, no wonder that I was acting out in certain ways, because they had these toxic traits, and that's just not right. And then I told my friend about it, and she was like, yeah, like, your mom sounds like a narcissist. And I thought, I thought a narcissist was like a serial killer. Like, I didn't know what that meant. So I thought
not a commonly used word. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like, I wouldn't know how to use it in a sentence until I looked it up. And then I was like, oh yeah, like I Googled that as well. And she checked every box. And lo and behold, then I started my TikTok. It's funny because I'm a fitness coach. Like, I have social media for my business. But then I said, you know what? I'm going to run TikTok. Like, I'm just going to share my stories of this side of my life. Like, I'm not doing it for a business purpose. I want to share because I need to get it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I posted just stories of things that happened to me. And then it felt really good to feel validated. Like, people were like, yeah, like, I went through that. Or like, oh my God, I didn't know that's what narcissistic behavior is. And lo and behold, that's really what led to me healing ultimately.
That's amazing. So you're saying that you've just recently decided to kind of like come forward and talk about your experience. And so this is new for you. Is that right?
Relatively
a little
new.
Bit, yeah.
It's been about a year now that I've been coming to terms with it and talking about it.
That's awesome. Social media, like it, I know that a lot of social media in certain aspects get such a bad rap, but that's one of the things that I love about TikTok so much, is that it's a platform where we can just kind of like talk and express ourselves. And then it's so easily like accessible to some people that, I don't know, it's just like you get all these people and you're getting support and you're just like, oh my gosh, this feels great. Cause like you said, you don't feel alone. And then there are probably other people that have decided to follow you that have similar experiences. And they're just like, okay, this is how she's coping with it. Like that's awesome.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from TikTok, and I think it's a different platform. It's just something about it feels more genuine. Like people show up as their real self. That's
Yeah.
what I got from it. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. So, with when you talk about the relationship that you have with your mother, and you talked about therapy as a child, I noticed that I went through and rewatched some of your videos today just so that I can get a little bit more of a background for you. So you as a family sought therapy when you were younger, and this because they thought something was like wrong with you, or how did that go?
exactly. Everything was always approached as like, when you're a child, you're a clean slate, right? So anything your parents tell you, you believe, whether you like it
Yeah.
or not. And I had anxiety from, so looking back, like my earliest memories, my mother always insulted like my weight. Like I remember her being very just stressed and on edge all the time and pushing that on me. Like I remember I have a 5-year-old son, and I remember walking home from kindergarten and I asked her if she could, it's my teacher's last day. I was like, "Can you make a cake for her tomorrow?" She's like, "I don't care about your teacher. I'm too busy for that." And just that kind of stuff, like her attitude, I knew that she kind of rubbed me that way. So anyways,
Yeah.
then I had anxiety, and then no doubt because of my family life. And I always thought my anxiety came out of nowhere. And it's funny because my parents, they wanted to help me, but they kind of were like, "Oh no, our poor child has a mental illness like that came out of nowhere, like a crazy mental illness that we don't know what caused it. Like we got to treat
Yeah.
this." And so yes, that started that way. So then I went to therapy for myself for that, and nowhere did they say toxic family, nothing. And then that was when I was like maybe 12, and then when I was like 13 or 14, I started being very like rebellious. Like I hated my parents were very strict. Like my mom never let me have friends. She always like from insulting my weight to like she would then say like, "Oh," kind of like allude to the fact that I'm kind of like dressing like a whore even though I'm like young. Like she just said things that I just made me feel horrible about myself. So I decided like, I really don't like my family life. I started like smoking pot and doing bad things and all that. But looking back, it was because I was like, well, these people seem a lot more fun than these freaking people I have at home. Like,
Yeah. I'm
so
gonna
that,
like try that out.
yeah, exactly. It was like, I don't want to be like, I want to have friends, number one. I want to be happy, number two. And I want someone who can have fun with and not be so grumpy all the time. So then they didn't like that. And then they thought that, again, the anxiety was my issue. And now they're like, "Oh, wow, where did this rebellion come from that came out of nowhere?" And, their solution was more rules, more restriction. The therapy was more like, how do we deal with our troubled child? Like what did we do to deserve this kind of thing? And then I remember like going to therapy very clearly, and that's kind of what I talked about in the beginning about they didn't understand. And I remember just dumping everything on them. I'm like, "But you don't get the home life I have." I'm like, "This is how my mom is, this is how my dad is." And then I remember the therapist being like, "Well, did you know that there's children out there whose parents tell them they don't love them and they kick them out of their home, and you should be grateful that's not you." And I remember thinking like, I don't have a good family. Like, I
This
deserve
is my
more.
issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I remember just feeling like I think teenagers now looking back, like people give them a bad rap. Like they just want to be heard. Like they're human too. And I think that there's high hormones, there's different, you're not really good at communicating your feelings yet. And when your parents have been pushing down your feelings your whole life, you're even worse than at it. So my only way I knew how to communicate my feelings was to scream it from the rooftops. And I was like, "But I have a bad family life." Um, and yeah, that the therapist definitely did not hear me back then. And this was, so I'm 30, so that was probably 15 years ago. And I think now going to therapy, my therapist was like, "Hey, like this totally makes sense. Like toxic family, narcissistic mom." But yeah, back then, unfortunately, it was not the case.
That is like it's so wild like you telling me your experience because you're saying these things and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like that like I see that like that I experienced that." And like I'm not trying to throw any shade to that relationship because we're actually like we're working on that relationship because we have a child together. So he's doing better. And again, we're rebuilding that. So I'm not trying to like throw shade on him really like right now, but I do want
Mhm.
to, talk about the fact that I want to jump on a couple things here. Let me talk about the therapy first, because I'm a huge advocate for therapy, and getting help when you need it. Excuse me. Um, oh gosh, sorry. Let me just take a sip of my tea. I was
Take
like,
your
I
time.
took
I
some
know.
Benadryl, and I was like, oh my gosh, because like, my nose has been so runny.
It's all good.
We'll just make my husband cut this part out, and he'll love me for it later. um, so I wanted to talk about the therapy because, like I said, I'm a huge advocate of getting help with a therapist if you need it, and but that's so interesting to me that at a young age, I don't know if it's just like different now and it's gotten better and but like when you're telling me these things and a therapist is like their response to you is, oh well, there's other kids that have it worse. I feel like they're kind of like putting these blinders on and they're like, okay, the parents brought this child in because she's having issues, so we got to figure out what these issues are. Like a parent that's being, a bad parent is not going to bring a kid to therapy type situation. And I think that, that's a difficult place to be, because I actually sought therapy for my daughter after I got out of that toxic relationship because I wanted her to be okay first. And so I'm like going in and I'm like, okay, she's going to, let her tell you what's going on, what's bothering her. But like, here's kind of the backstory of like what she experienced and like what she saw in the family dynamics. And that therapist did a really good job of like, not like saying that the parent was bad, but like really kind of letting the child like talk about it and ways to handle it and ways to cope with it instead of just being like, well, there's kids that have it worse than you.
I love
Um,
that.
so that makes me so sad that like that you experienced that because, um, but I'm glad that you're able to say you're doing therapy now or you got it as an adult and it's helped you.
I've gotten it. I'm not like actively in therapy at the moment, but I
Yeah.
100% believe in it.
Yeah, and so it's interesting that we have to like wait until we get older for a therapist to look at it as an adult's view or version of it for them to say, okay, yeah, there was something definitely wrong because you probably would have received a lot more help at that younger, more vulnerable stage had it been approached properly. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, like that's so unfortunate that that happened, but I'm so glad that you were able to talk to somebody that was more helpful in your older years. And so do you think that your mom realized that there was an issue on her end? Because I know in my situation, that person never they usually never see fault. It's always someone else's fault. And I think you said that earlier. And so in retrospect, like we feel like, okay, are we doing something wrong? Or like, and you mentioned like not being able to have friends and body shaming and things like that. And I wonder if that's like a key um trait for people with narcissism. It's like they do the same thing. You were listing off all the things. I was like, yep, yep, yep.
Yeah. So on that note, absolutely, I agree with you. They don't see it. And sometimes, I don't know if you went through this, but when I first found out that she's a narcissist, it's like I was so enraged that like I felt I grieved the years I lost feeling bad that I was the problem. And I thought, oh my God, if only I could go back and tell myself, like, this isn't your fault. Like, you're going through this at no fault of your own. Please don't carry that burden of guilt. And then secondly, I was like, oh, I just need to get it through. I need her to feel remorse for her actions. Like that was kind of like what I wanted. And it was
Right.
like, so I actually decided my first therapy session about this all. I found my therapist on TikTok too. Anyways,
That's
she
awesome.
yeah, again, it's amazing. And because she was super trauma informed, she helped me realize everything. And then the first session, I said to her, like, it was pretty much just me kind of spewing about my mom. And I was like, and I'm gonna just tell her everything. And I told her, I'm like, I recorded like a 20-minute video saying like this, and this is what happened. I can't believe it. And it was a lot of anger in that. And my therapist said, that's great for you. Like, that's what I suggest sometimes, or writing a letter. Great for you, but just know that what's the reaction that you want? And then I was
Yeah.
like, there's no way in hell. My mom would never watch it and be like, wow, I'm really enlightened. Like, I'm definitely gonna, it's like, that's when you're like, did she feel remorse? Like, I actually like I kind of giggled inside because I'm like, oh no, like she never will. Um,
Yeah.
then when the anger subsided and I came to terms with that, and I have a friend that she at the same time was going through a separation with her partner who is a narcissist, and they're co-parenting. And anyway, we kind of bounced off each other about the similarities. So that was also validating, to see the symptoms and to just tell each other like, hey, if you have to maintain ties with them, they're not going to react the way you want them to, but that's okay. So yeah, now I'm at the stage where I accept that I'm never going to get, I guess, the closure from her, but I don't need it.
Right. And you feel like probably that video is probably super therapeutic for you to get to a point where you're just like, okay, like I've dealt with this in a healthy way, and now you can kind of just like let it go type, you know. And still, of course we talk about healing on the podcast all the time, and like how healing happens every day. Sometimes it's a lifelong thing. You never fully get, air quotes, healed. So I think that's great that your therapist recommended that you do the video, right? Is that where you got that from?
She did. And then she told me, she's like, you can send it, if it'll make you feel better. So I've not sent the video. I made two or three other variations, and each time it's a little bit less angry.
Yeah.
It's like, because it's like, even narcissists are like, I don't think I'll ever get through to her, but especially not when it's just like screaming the whole time, which
Right.
is really the only way we knew how to communicate in the past. But that's a story
Right.
for another day.
Yeah.
Like they leave you no chance because it's like you're not listening when I'm calm, you're not listening when I'm screaming. So yeah, I don't know. Like I come, that TikTok sound that's like I'm getting closer and closer every
Yeah.
day. Do you know the one?
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, I'm getting closer to sending it, but I haven't pulled the trigger yet because it's funny because at the stage of healing, I like that you said you're never really there. It's like a process, but it's like I feel like stirring these things up will make it more emotionally charged. Like if I send it to her, then I don't want to create, like, I'm doing my own healing, and I know that she's not
Right.
actually involved in my healing. So if I bring this up to her, I don't want to bring up more drama in my own life.
Right. And like, especially like I can totally relate to that. Cause I actually wrote a letter, and like it had gotten to the point where I was just like, I just want to send, these terrible text messages of like how I feel and how you made me feel.
Yeah,
But sometimes when you engage in that, and you're getting that response back, and then it's kind of like just a cycle that just keeps going. And so for me it was, I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna write this letter, I'm gonna tell you how I feel, and like yada yada yada. And then like I just folded it up and I tucked it away, and like I still have it. I don't
yeah,
know that I'll ever give it. But it was just kind of like a symbolic way for me to be like, okay, I have to start the healing process. And if I'm constantly like thinking about it all the time, like, or feeling like I want to say something, um, again, it goes back into that whole cycle. So I can totally understand the hesitation of not sending that, because it could reopen that conversation up. And until you're physically, mentally ready to have that conversation, and it may never happen, and that's okay. And I think that people need to realize that, that
yeah.
it's okay to like not address it. You've addressed it with yourself, and you're working on healing yourself. So do you think that your mom's, I don't even really know if it's like characterized as like a mental illness, or if it's just like a human trait maybe. Do you think that stems from something? Like, was her parents, your grandparents, were they would do you know if they were similar in the way that they were?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that she does have that trauma. And it's funny because, whenever I talk about my mom, like I find, I don't know if you've gotten this, but then they'll be like, oh, well, she had her own stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
always kind of hated that response because it kind of says, like, well, she's allowed to, SHIT all over her kids' mental health then. Because that's
Yeah.
like me saying, well, man, I went through a lot of stuff. I better just push
Yeah.
that onto my kid. Like, yeah, she did. She never had, her father passed away when she was 5, and then her mom was, I'm from former Yugoslavia, so it was like a war torn country, and there was a ton of trauma in her life, 100%. And she would talk about that trauma with me like all the time, when I was younger. And again, that was kind of part of her kind of pushing the adult problems on me. She just didn't really know the appropriate way to emotionally parent a child overall.
Right.
So instead of, instead of working through her trauma, which obviously, like, we have tools now. And like you said, we have therapists now who are informed about how to work through trauma more. And there's even resources like social media that even can get you there to some degree, or get you started and get the wheels turning. And then, I remind myself, like, no, she didn't have that. But then I also tell myself, like, something I tell my kids is, when you know better, you do better. Like when you know that the way that you were parented and things that you went through were difficult, and went through some sort of trauma or not a positive experience, then at least try and be the best parent you can be. And that's really where I'm having a hard time forgiving, because it's like,
Right.
with narcissists, like, I they just they can't see, like, especially with the parent child dynamic, they can't think like, oh, I need to think about my child's feelings. They're like, oh, well, I had a hard life, so this is how I'm going to parent my kid. That's what I think.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm glad you touched on the parent part of that, because I was going to ask you, with you have you have a son, right?
I have two sons.
Two sons. Okay. So as a parent, like, I know that, like, you always hear you want to be a better parent than what you had. Even if you didn't have a bad parent or about
Yeah.
bad childhood, we always want. I mean, I remember growing up as a kid being like, I'm gonna let my kid do this, and I'm not gonna let my kid do that. But when you get older and you realize that some of those things aren't important roles. But again, we always want to be the better parent than what we had. So how has this experience affected you as a mother?
Yeah, that's a great observation too, because I always knew, despite that I didn't know my mom's a narcissist or even the word toxic, like, I knew that I didn't like so many things about how I was parented. So you're absolutely right. You think like, well, like, even with being strict, I was like, this just doesn't work, because, if you're just punishing me and you're not actually letting me be honest with you, I'm going to be an expert liar. And I definitely was.
Right. Exactly.
Like, if anyone knew how to keep a secret, trust me, I came up with some elaborate things in high school.
Right.
But anyway, then I thought to myself, this makes no sense. Like, of course, I'm going to let my kids, I'm not going to judge them and things like that. And it's funny because now, of course, I still am trying to parent different, but then I also notice certain things, like the things that are obvious, like, okay, I don't want to be strict like they were, or I'm not going to be judgmental or say hateful things about their body. But then more things, when you realize, like, things that are ingrained. For instance, like, I was always taught that when your kid is bad, you need to yell at them. And then, even though I knew my mom was toxic, I thought, oh, well, of course you're going to yell at your kid when they're bad. Like, that's the way they learn.
Right.
And
Exactly.
then, yeah, and I was like, well, I don't want to yell. I don't want anyone to yell at me, and they don't deserve that. Like, just because they don't have power to say don't do that. So it was these kind of toxic parenting things that I think aren't exclusive to narcissistic parents. I think a lot of parents did the best they could, even though they're
Right.
not narcissistic. There's things to improve on. So for me, like, I'm just learning things with my kids more, like the gentle parenting approach. Yeah, like, I'm opening myself up to something I tell my clients. I want to be coachable and open to learning, like, when it comes to
Yeah.
parenting.
Absolutely. It's funny that you say that. Like, I love my mom. She's a great mom, but we always would tell people we are yellers. My mom
Mm,
yelled, I yell. And so, it's funny that you mentioned the gentle parenting, because I have a newborn, and so I'm like, okay,
congrats.
so thank you. So I'm like, okay, with this one, like, it's retraining yourself to what you're used to and what you're accustomed to growing up. And the we don't raise our voices with our children now. We do try the gentle parenting approach of, like, asking what's wrong, and, like, that sort of. Still a newbie on that, but I'm glad that you said that, because yeah, it's definitely, and it can be challenging, and I think that that's important that people understand too, is that bad habits are hard to break, but
Totally.
you can definitely break them. You just have to, like, put some effort into it and step back and just be like, okay, and it's okay to, like, get angry, and it's okay to be upset, and then it's just the way that we have to choose how we are going to use those emotions. If we need to, remove ourselves from the room for a few minutes and just, like, calm down or whatever. So yeah, that's that's awesome that you're trying and that you're doing. differently than what you were raised.
Yeah. I mean, that's all you can do. Do your best. I like that you said it's never perfect either. Like, I think it's just about learning along the way,
It
just like healing,
is.
right?
And I think that, yeah, just like healing, and everybody, everybody's like, it's not, it's not a race, it's a marathon. It's every day's a learning experience and a day to do better. So yeah, but
Yeah.
that's, yeah, great advice. So I did see that you still have a relationship with your mother. You haven't a lot of people are like, oh, well, I would just not talk to them anymore. And
Hmm.
that's still your mom. And so you still have that relationship, but you've just learned to navigate that differently now, would you say?
Yeah, that's a good observation because on TikTok, like, people love to just think they know your life better than you. Like, a lot of people are like, well, you share all these stories, but why is she still in your life? Like, or someone, my favorite was like, how could you let that demon be around your kids?
Oh my gosh.
And then, I want to, like, I always say, like, a phrase I like to use is nothing is one dimensional. Like, the reason, because, obviously I want to be open and honest here. The reason she's in my life is kind of complex. Like, it's, to be quite honest, sounds kind of harsh, but I never really enjoy spending time with her. Like, I never have. I never have said, like, I miss my mom, or like the worst scenario is just to be kind of alone with her in a conversation because we don't jive. But so she's in my life mainly because I have my kids, to be honest. And I think that if my parents were not together, because I don't want to don't ghost my dad, and they're together. That's a big one. If they weren't together, and I didn't have my kids, then no way, I would never have her in my life. But a part of it is I'm not ready to have such a big conversation with my kids yet about that. I really don't know how to navigate that still. Like, my oldest is 5, my youngest is only 18 months. So right now, what works best for me is I see them, my parents, like, will visit them a lot less now, like maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks. And when we do, we have hard boundaries, and they know that if they cross the boundaries, then they're, they know that, we're not going to come around as often. So that's, that's really worked best. And I think that I'm not ruling out, like, going no contact, but for my
Yeah.
current situation, I'm again factoring in all the other things.
Yeah, and I think that's important that people realize that too, is that, like you said, everything is not just cut and dry. And then, of course, because they don't live your life and they don't understand what you've been through, or, the best way to navigate through that is we only know what's best for ourselves. Um, but yeah, so have you, even, I'm not sure how I want to ask this question. You haven't had a discussion with your mom to let her know how you feel? You're just choosing to not speak on that at all, or have you guys tried to have a conversation before and it just didn't really work out?
Well, no, yeah, that's a great question because the last time we, I guess you could say, butted heads about anything big in terms of like a conversation was probably when I was younger and living with her. Like, I haven't lived with her since I had my first son. So it seemed like the things she did, the stories I tell on TikTok, these are things that happened when I lived with her and when I was mainly a teenager or younger. So, you know, bringing it up now, it's almost like we haven't had that conversation in so long that I know it's just gonna open up so many cans of worms. So the reason I haven't brought anything up recently is because I always ask myself, like, what is the goal of bringing it up? Because a lot of my friends will say, like, well, isn't the ultimate goal like to have a great relationship with your mom? I'm like, that's not gonna happen. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like I'm gonna bring it up and she's gonna understand. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, like, I haven't brought up the conversation, as I told you, because I don't want to cause the drama now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in the past, it's like it's almost like I have a mental, like, I have a sick feeling in my stomach when I think about having a confrontational conversation with either of my parents, because when I would have any sort of, like, when I told them bad news when I was younger, they would blame me and be horrible and, like, just give me a horrible reaction. When I had something good to say, my mom especially, would shoot down my happiness. So it's almost like anytime I think about having a confrontational conversation, I'm like, the mind and body are connected. So the physical symptoms I have, it's like butterflies, like sweating, like sick, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so I thought to myself, like, again, the goal is not to get her to understand. So that's why I've avoided even telling her about any of my realizations.
I think that's important that you say that because, um, again, everybody always has such an opinion, or I would do it this way, or I would do it that way. And the more people that I talk to that have experienced trauma, say the same thing that, it's you handle it how you feel like you should handle it. What's best for you is not what's always best for somebody else. So I can totally relate and understand when you say it's kind of like reopening a wound that doesn't necessarily need to be opened again. You've
Yes.
dealt with it. You're coexisting, which I think is great. Um, for you and for your healing, that's what works best for you. And I think that, I don't want to tell people to kind of like bottle it up and like push it away. Again, everybody does healing differently. For me, in my experience, it's kind of one of those situations that if I don't really think about it, I kind of forget how bad it was. And then it's like, I don't really want to talk about it because I don't want to really remember how bad it was. I'm,
Yeah.
you know,
I love how you said the one thing that stuck out was everyone's healing looks different. And what was the exact phrase you used? Like everyone thinks they know what you need to do. And yeah, that wound might not need to be opened. And you know what's best for you. Like for me, like I went so many years like kind of living life on my mom's terms and kind of being bullied by her and going through these negative emotions that now I tell myself, well, if I need to stay away from her to heal, I'm going to do that without guilt. Or, if I want to avoid any more future conflict with her, I deserve that because I went through so
right,
much conflict already. And it was so one-sided. It's not like if my husband and I, who's not, he's not a narcissist, if we got into a conflict, like I wouldn't say like, well, we're just not going to talk anymore. Like
yeah,
that's a relationship I care about, who he's normal and he'll, well, it's always difficult to have a challenging conversation with someone, but it's necessary
yes,
sometimes. And another thing with TikTok actually too, because like I mentioned you, big part of my healing was sharing my story. And I think that helped me a lot more even than talking to my mom about it, because it was talking to people who went through it from my side, right? Who as victims, and they understood. And even with that, like I found that I got to a point where I was like, it feels like I heard this phrase recently. I was really stewing in my thoughts. Like I was really just kind of like just reliving these experiences, but living in a very negative place, like not kind of coming out of that. So then I took a step back from even sharing there. And then all that kind of made me realize like you have to do whatever you need to do for your own mental health in the moment, whatever that looks like. Maybe I don't want to share on TikTok too much anymore. Maybe sometimes I do, but
yeah.
it depends.
That's so true. I know because I had seen a few times. I was going to ask you when people like selfishly, but not selfishly. I don't really know if selfish is the good word because I don't think it's intentional triggering. But the more times I talk with people who have experienced trauma and are survivors of trauma, we have to learn how to approach those subjects with the victim. Because we I'm learning to reword the way that I talk and the way that I think. And I know that one time you had mentioned that sometimes it gets overwhelming when people are like, "Oh, here's my experience. Can you tell me, your advice?" Not realizing that giving somebody that information can be traumatic to the person that you're giving it to as well, because again, we're all healing every day. So, how do you navigate through people reaching out to you and sharing their experience? Um, I know that you said on some of your platforms that you don't like to give advice. What do you say to these people when they reach out to you like that?
That's a good question. At first I was like, wow, I'm so honored that people even want to take my advice because I'm not I'm still not healed, quote unquote. And again, that's not an
Yeah,
end thing.
yeah,
But second of all, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a professional in any aspect. Like I'm still figuring a lot of things out myself. So that's a big part of why I don't give advice, is because I don't want to steer someone in the wrong direction. I mean, if it was like a friend, I could, even then I would probably say like, hey, look, like, I think you should talk to XYZ and that kind of thing. That's kind of my overarching answer, like seek someone who knows this. But
right.
also like you take on a lot of people's emotional energy. And I don't think that's something, I think it's okay anytime you're on social media for any aspect. It's okay to say like, like for instance, there's certain things I don't want to discuss on my social media, and there's certain Like that's why I don't want to, if you don't have the emotional capacity to take on other people's pain as well, I think that's okay, you know?
Absolutely. I think we need to normalize that, as well as just, advocate to people that, seeking help is okay, and you're going to get the best help through a professional.
Yeah, totally.
So reaching out to an influencer, I mean, you have your not and not discounting friends, because I do think that friends can be very therapeutic and very helpful in certain situations, but sometimes the best advice for seeking help is to just find somebody that specializes in that, because then they're going to give you like real solutions, and they're going to help you like work through that, because just saying, oh, this was my experience, what do you think I should do, it's so like it's so much deeper than that. And
Exactly.
so that's great. Yeah. And I totally understand, and I think that I could probably say that goes for a lot of trauma victims, is that's the best way for them to handle it. You don't want to give them way too much. Like you don't want to be a trigger for somebody that is in the healing process. So I have a few questions that I wanted to ask you that I like to ask all of my guests. So
Yeah.
we'll go with the first one. If you could remember, how would you describe your ambitions as a child, and how you saw yourself and what you were capable of as a person?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Geez,
it's
that's
like
like an emotionally charged question.
yeah,
I love that. I love that reflection. Oh my gosh, it's so wild because I think because my mom was never one to see potential in me and or to encourage me to be like, you can do it, honey, like reach for the stars.
right,
So
right.
I very much saw myself as I guess that's why I focused so because I felt like I was fat and according to her. So I focused a lot of my effort on my being intellectual and so I would say my ambitions, are you talking personal ambitions or like career ambitions or anything?
Personal or career, either one. Just because, like, I know that that's probably, like you said, that's a tough question for you, having experience. Like you said, most people's moms are like, "Oh, you can do this and you can do anything you set your mind to." So,
Hmm.
as a child, did you have to like reach deeper to kind of like find those ambitions, or was it, or were you at a place where you just didn't really know for a long time because you didn't have that support at home?
Yeah, I think that you're right. The latter. I didn't have any big ambitions because I was always taught that having big ambitions was unrealistic. And it's funny because I can't remember any ambitions I had other than the fact like be smart. Like again, I said I got good grades. I was like, well,
Right.
I'll go to school and get a great job as an employee. And then I ended up being an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. And so yeah, the ambitions was something I had to learn in adulthood.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. What's been your stickiest struggle that has stuck with you on your journey?
Oh my God, definitely dealing with my emotions still.
Yeah.
Um, Learning to be empathetic and to just I think the biggest struggle for me was to just continuing to learn positive communication.
So was there any aha moment in the era of your journey where you realized the key to overcome these things? Like, did you have a time where you were like, okay, this is like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I need to realize that I'm so much more than what I've been told for so long.
Oh my God, that's such a good question. I don't know if it was one moment, but it's so funny because you can't narrow it down to one moment in time.
Right.
I just remember feeling at one point, like after, again, I told you the anger initially, after that subsided, I thought to myself, well, okay, how do I move forward from this anger? So then at that stage, when I realized, like, wait a minute, actually don't have to have anything from her to heal myself, that was probably my aha moment.
That's awesome. We like to talk about stepping into our own power and not thinking of that as a bad thing. I know that the word power can sometimes kind of carry this like stigma of like, you think of money, you think of people in power, and you don't really think of that as always a positive thing. How would you think of, or how would you describe the power that you have to try to step into every day?
Yeah, it's funny you said that because I do think that's a positive, empowering thing, actually. Like, I
Yeah.
always say again, some people might not agree, but I think we definitely all have the power. We have the power to shape a lot of how, not necessarily the events in our life, but how we respond. So to me, power means like, hey, I don't need to control every single thing because that's going to drive me nuts. I can't control so and so's reaction or the events in my life, but what I can manage is the way that I react, and that's
Yes.
going to give me a whole lot of power back.
That's so awesome that you said that, because I hear that a lot from my husband, who, I think because of being in that situation for so long, we can't help but kind of get into a negative mindset because everything was negative for so long, and looking at things, you immediately jump to that negative response or that negative thought. And so, like you said, when you realize, okay, like I have control over my thoughts, and I have control over how I view these certain struggles or any kind of situation, and to not look at the negative immediately and say, okay, I'm going to look for the positive in it, I think is probably one of the hardest things with people that have been through something like what you've been through. And then maybe even just in general, like, um, with things that are going on in the world and things like that, or things that are going on at home, you just have to really try hard to look for that positive thing.
You're right. Yeah, definitely.
So what's the best piece of advice you have ever been given by somebody?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I think that that last thing I said probably is up there. Like you can't control others' um, reactions, but you can control your own reaction or your own emotions.
Yeah,
You can't control
that's
the. I'm probably wording that in better. You can't control things around you, but you can control your own reaction to it.
right. Yeah, like how we view that. That's awesome. That's
And
perfect advice.
and back to also another little one about like the thing you said about optimism that immediately stuck out. It's like being optimistic doesn't mean that you don't think that there's anything bad happening. It just means that you know that that means something good will happen too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm glad you said that too, because one of the things that I experienced was, I know that you said that you thought you didn't have that support of like your dreams per se.
Hmm.
So in my experience, I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur of some sort. It just has been in me since I can remember. I always knew I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I just wasn't really sure exactly what it was. And so, like, I remember there were points in my life where I was like, well, I want to open up a dance studio. Okay, well, I want to open up a bakery. And, you know, we're talking about being optimistic here, and like to
Yeah.
me, I've always felt like I've had that optimism of being able to do anything that I set my mind to. But I would have that person say, like, one of the like key phrases that they use was, i'm I'm not optimistic, I'm realistic. And so
Oh man,
you
sounds
would
like my mom.
yeah, like that's not realistic. Like, you have to be realistic. What if this happens bad? What if this happens, or what if that happens? And always kind of going towards negative that negative thought pattern. And so, unfortunately, when we have been around that for so long, like, those do kind of seep in trying to fight against that. So, like, I give you high fives virtually for being an entrepreneur and deciding that,
Same
like,
here, girl.
yeah, like, okay, I'm gonna do this because, in spite, maybe, I don't know. But I'm so glad that you were able to get over that and seek out a future that you're happy with. What's the best piece of advice that you would give a younger version of yourself who is in the thick of their struggle, if you had a moment with them?
Oh my God. I think about this a lot. I love that
Yeah.
question. I would say, like, just don't be afraid to be yourself. And if, even though I was never encouraged to be myself, and that led me to, very much be afraid of coming out as my true self, I
Yeah.
think, it's like that saying, like, what is it, Dr. Seuss, be yourself because the people who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter or don't mind, something like that.
Yeah,
You
I know
know the
what you're
one.
saying. Yes.
So basically, like, just don't be afraid to show up as your true self, and be confident, and be say the things you want to say, and be authentic about your feelings and your expression, because that's all really that matters. You only have one life.
That's that's right. Yes. And live it to your fullest, whatever that is. Um that's so awesome. Yeah. I want to thank you so much for being on today. Like, I know that, that it's never easy for someone who has been through a traumatic experience, especially in childhood, when we're our most vulnerable and our most moldable. And I'm so thankful that you were able to, to take that experience and to be the person that you are today. Like you said before, you are in control of, of yourself ultimately. And you make that decision every day to be the best version of yourself. And like, I just think that that's amazing.
Thank you, Jessica. This was awesome. Absolutely
I'm
loved
so
it.
glad. I'm so glad that you agreed to come on today. Like, I think your story is an important one, and I'm certain that it's going to help somebody that's listening to this. So after the podcast, I will be heading straight to my easel and creating a painting that represents what I personally felt and saw from your amazing story of transformation and finding your power. If anyone is interested in seeing the process, you can follow us on Instagram, or if you're interested in purchasing one of the limited print editions of the painting, you can do so as well on my website. But yes, thank you so much for being on today. You have been amazing.
Thank you. Can't wait to see what you come up with.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. I want to thank my guest again for being on the show and sharing their incredible story of transformation with us. I'm going to link their social medias below so that if you want to give them a follow and encourage them through their journey, you can do so. Also, if you personally felt connected with the story and you would like to purchase one of the prints that goes along with it to help support the podcast, you can do so at jessicajames.com. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at I Empower Club, and of course, like and subscribe so that you don't miss next week's episode of I Empower. See you then.